Hey, this is Steve Baltin. You are listening to Speakeasy on the Independent FM. And tonight we are joined by Incubus frontman Brandon Boyd, who talks to us about his upcoming solo album, his new book, hanging out with the band Korn, and so many other topics. Thanks for being here.
You do get that a lot too in all walks of, the quote-unquote industry. That's one of the things that is interesting to try and weather when you're in those darker moments when sort of, it can be press people, it can be a religious zealot of some kind, any walk of life. People will think that they know what's going on based on a name or the way that the band looks, and Incubus has definitely dealt with that on a number of occasions. And what's been interesting, though, is that sometimes those same people will stay and watch a couple of songs, and then occasionally they become friends and listeners.
All right. What's interesting about that, though, as well, it's so funny, is you guys have been 20-something years now. Mm-hmm. Had this conversation with Jonathan from Korn not long ago. I've known those guys for years. I know you were label mates for a long ass time.
They really helped us actually a lot in the early days of us being on Immortal Records. They took us out on our first big tour. First time we ever toured Europe was opening up for Korn.
That's crazy.
And it was so much fun. It was super scary but really, really fun. And they got us in front of large audiences kind of right off the bat overseas. But yeah, awesome guys in that band. We're kind of forever indebted to them. And them and in a handful of other bands. I was just talking about this, the Osborne family. Every time I think of them or I see any of the kids who aren't kids anymore, I just want to hug them and be like, we actually wouldn't be anywhere near where we are if it weren't for the handful of opportunities they provided, whether it was opening for Black Sabbath in 1999 or Ozfest 98, Ozfest 2000. I mean, those things they were so kind of seminal in our career. So.
And all you need to say is opening for Black Sabbath.
I know, exactly. It still sounds cool. When I say it, I'm like, yes, yes. It was an odd pairing because it was also Pantera. It was Incubus, Pantera, Black Sabbath, which sounds just for going on the way the name sounds, it sounds perfect. But we were definitely a little light, I think, for some of their audience, but it actually went over pretty well.
I think Sabbath at times is light for the Pantera audience. So
yes, perhaps. Yeah.
So I mean, there aren't that many bands where Sabbath seems downright melodic. And of course, I love Pantera, not knocking them, but it's that's kind of one speed, one aggression.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've had the chance to interview Ozzy many times over the years as well. I'm sure that, you learned a lot on those experiences. But let's go back for a second, because what I was saying with Korn, and we'll come back, I want to hear some of your stories in a second, but what was interesting, Jonathan and I were just talking about the fact that, after 20 years, he was in Belgium when we did the interview, and he was staying at this hotel with all these, German dignitaries, and all these people kept coming over and wanting to take pictures, and he's like, what the fuck? Yeah. And this one woman was like, I'm old enough to be your mother, but you're in Korn, aren't you? I still want to take a picture with you, and she was a politician, and he's just like, what the fuck? I'm like, well, that's what happens with longevity.
That's
and he's like, yeah. He's like, he just started cracking up. He's like, well, I'm glad you get it because I was laughing my ass off. But I'm sure now for Incubus at that point, even with the zealots and the protesters, there is that little bit of, dude, 20-something years now, it's like you get that credibility that it's just like, all right, you're not going anywhere. Now we kind of respect you.
Yeah, it's sort of a hard-won respect. It's almost like tenure, for better or worse now. But it is so interesting having been now. We've been a band for 22 years and put out 7 full-length records and a handful of EPs and DVDs and all these things. And in so many ways, I know you probably hear this a lot from lots of different bands, but it is very true. In so many ways, it feels like we're just getting started. It feels like we're just kind of figuring out what it is that we do and how we relate to the wider world of art and music, and which I think is why we probably branch off when we're not doing Incubus things into solo things, because it as it grows and the longer we're doing it, I think our interests expand exponentially, and our love of that kind of mothership, Incubus, we'll call that the mothership for us. Doesn't change. In fact, it just grows more. I think it just grows. The love of it grows, but it becomes almost polyamorous, like our creative interests. And so all of us have a tendency to want to honor the mothership, but then reach out a little bit further and do different things. And what's been so cool is watching how the diversity in this band, everybody expresses themselves individually in kind of vastly different ways than we express ourselves when we're in Incubus. So for Michael, it's like he'll go from scoring films, some of them independent, some of them like big films he's been involved with, to Mikey has like he co-wrote and I think co-produced the song with an electronic artist named Avicii.
Yeah.
I've just been finding out about this, but it's like a #1 song in almost 40 countries, and it's insane. And it's just awesome. It's like, okay, that's so random, but he's doing so well in that regard. And then Ben Kenny, our bass player, has been touring behind his solo stuff, and I went and saw them at the Roxy last month, and Chris Kilmore opened up for him actually, and the music is it's really, really great, but so different than Incubus. And then obviously I'm doing my Sons of the Sea thing with Brendan O'Brien, and it has some through lines to Incubus, I think probably most notably because it's like I'm the singer, and so it's the same kind of vocal identity there. But once again, in my opinion, pretty vastly different than anything Incubus has done. So
I would imagine one of the through lines, though, as well, is also just working with Brendan, because you've had such a long relationship with him.
We have. He's done 3 Incubus records now. So Prologue to the Murder, Like Grenades, and Not Now When. He actually produced a couple of songs on our Greatest Hits thing, Monuments and Melodies, too. But yeah, it was really cool. It's always been awesome working with Brendan for so many reasons, not the least of which is that he's kind of like a musical hero of mine, but also all the guys in the band for all of the kind of great albums he's been involved with. But we've only ever worked with 3 producers. We've worked with a guy named Jim Wirt, who did our record Science, and we worked with Scott Litt, who did Make Yourself and a few of the songs on Morning View. And but what's so cool about working with guys like these is that I learn so much through each process, and learn about melodic structures and harmonic structures, songwriting, and there's never like an end point to what you learn in songwriting. So for me, like working with Brendan for 3 albums with Incubus and then doing something on our own, Sons of the Sea, it was like working with a totally different person, but with the best parts that I'd come to know him as. So it was super fun, very interesting. I'm really stoked on what it turned out, actually.
Nice. Well, we'll talk about the songwriting lessons you learned in a minute. Let's take a quick break, play a song. Is there a track from Sons of the Sea that you really want to play?
Sure. I mean, can we play like anything from the record?
Anything you want.
All right.
Pick a track.
The song that has been kind of like getting the most kind of love that I can kind of see. There's only a 4-song EP that's come out. But one of the songs that listeners seem to be enjoying the most, and one of my favorites on the record, is called Lady Black.
Nice. All right. Well, this is Steve Baltin, Speakeasy, on Independent FM. We're here with Brandon Boyd. Let's check out the song Lady Black it is, and come back after that and talk more about songwriting lessons and working with Brendan O'Brien. Hey, it's Steve Baltin, Speakeasy on Independent FM. We are back with Brandon Boyd. We just heard Lady Black from Sons of the Sea EP. And before that break, we were just talking about all the different lessons that Brandon has learned in songwriting. And I mean, when you look at I'm going to be honest, I'm not that familiar with Jim Wirt's work, unfortunately, but Scott Litt I'm a huge fan of because I fucking love R.E.M. And I mean, in particular, I think he did Green, which to me is the greatest R.E.M. album of all time. Yeah. And then obviously Brendan O'Brien, I'm a Springsteen fanatic, he did The Rising. That's all that needs to be said. So when you're talking about artists who've gotten to work with Michael Stipe, Peter Buck, Bruce Springsteen, all of them, they're bringing a lot to the table with you. Yeah. So talk about some of those songwriting lessons that you've learned.
Yeah, we're absolutely in good company with Brendan O'Brien or Scott Litt as well. Scott also mixed the Nirvana Unplugged record and a few of the singles off of In Utero from Nirvana. So he's got Scott's got some chops in there. He's got some pretty rad history. But
yeah, they both do. When you're talking about both, you could just sit and list their credits. All day long. And I think didn't Brendan also work with Rage? I believe
he did the first handful of Rage records. He did most of the STP records, Pearl Jam. He was the engineer on Blood Sugar Sex Magic for Red Hot Chili Peppers. Brendan has a pretty phenomenal album. He's got pretty phenomenal discography. I love sometimes we're just taking a break and I'll just start asking him questions about, because these were my favorite bands growing up, and so it's great to work with the guy who either produced or engineered, had something to do with your favorite bands. But one of the things about Brendan, I think that probably separates him from other producers, is that he's a musician. I would say first and foremost, and he's a virtuoso musician who can kind of pick up any instrument. So working with him, Sons of the Sea, it was hugely different. It was really only the two of us putting these songs together. And I was kind of taking care of all of the drum things, the vocals, and the melodies and things like that. And then Brendan was kind of just crafting all of these beautiful musical architectures in and around all of these things. And then once we got to it, I actually had recorded all of the drums for the whole album, and then I started to get a little bit curious as to what it would sound like if there was a professional drummer doing something in there. So, long story short, Josh Freese came in and played he played the entire record, and there's a couple of parts we left with my drums on them because they sounded kind of fun and naive. But yeah, he's an incredible guitar player and piano player and bass player, and so it was awesome just to work with these. He would write like piano riffs, and I would write to piano riffs, and he would write these really weird guitar riffs that I would never have intuited on my own, and I got to write to that stuff. So the way that I've always kind of looked at it was like, and the way that I've written music with Michael from Incubus is that he would like write a riff or some kind of a basic song structure, and it's almost like a bit of a jungle gym, or a very sparse kind of architecture that I get to go in and climb all over or fill up with furniture, so to speak, you know. So in that regard, that's just kind of what we did together, Brendan and I.
You know, it's one of those things as well that as you're talking about bringing someone like Josh in, for example, who is another dude who's just played with, you know, again, there's always 1 degree of separation. He's played with Nine Inch Nails, fucking Trent Reznor fanatic, so, you know, can't go wrong with that. But I mean, anytime you get to hear other artists interpret your work, and this applies to Brendan as well.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously you have ideas. When you, as a writer, are, you know, crafting ideas, you have things that you hear in your head, you have visions, and of course then when they're actually executed, they always come out completely different.
Totally different, yeah.
So for you, when you heard Brendan's interpretation and Josh's, what were some of the things that really sort of changed in the making of the EP that actually pleasantly surprised you? You were like, all right, dude, I didn't hear that at all, but that's awesome.
Put it this way, I am not that cool left to my own devices. I'm blessed to work with people that make me seem and sound way cooler than I am naturally. So like my drum parts are, you know, I can play the drums okay, and I actually really love playing the drums, and I've been doing like hand percussion and things like that for most of my life, so I have a sense of rhythm, so I can like write those things. But then somebody like Josh comes in, not somebody like Josh comes in and plays the things that I wrote, but like there's just this, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's overt, this ability to just make even a simple 4 on the floor sound. Like, I didn't write that, but it's technically, like, if you wrote it out in notes, it would be kind of the same thing, but he, like, all these ghost notes and all this finesse that I don't know how to do, and it was pretty great, and he did it so fast, too. I think he did the entire record in, like, 4 days, tops. He probably could have done it in a day, but we were getting kind of nitpicky, you know, because we wanted it to be, like, as good as it could possibly be.
That's every artist, though.
Yeah. But then with like Brendan, like I would with a song like Lady Black we just heard, it was actually the first song that him and I wrote together, and it was born of an iPhone voice recorder idea that I had, which was just the melody of the verse and the chorus, and I had most of the lyrics there. But there was no music. I actually dream a lot just in melodies and lyrics, and especially recently. And so I just emailed it to him, my little voice memo, and then a day later, he calls me on the phone all excited, and the phone's like, you can hear all the, can you hear this? Okay, here's the guitar, check this out, tell me if you like this, and I hear my thing playing back through the phone, and then he starts playing along with it, this little guitar riff, and then the chorus riff with it, and I had never imagined that it would sound like that. Like, I had something totally different in mind, but his thing was just way better. It like held up the lyric and the melody like it was like a beautiful stem that allowed my thing to be the rose at the top of it. He was so good at it. It was really, really cool. It was very flattering, actually, is what I was attempting to do.
Nice. I want to go back to something you said, though, for a second, because
Yeah.
I think as we were talking at the beginning of the program about music education and the different things you have in classes, I really think you hit upon something that would be the first rule for every musician, which is just simply to hang out with people who make you look cooler
Yes.
than you are.
Lesson number one, students.
So how early on in your career did you realize, like, you know what? I'm not that cool, which, by the way, anybody who can admit that, of course, is, and realize, like, I need to hang out with people who, yeah, as soon as you say that, I was also thinking of Philip Seymour Hoffman and Almost Famous, who was, you know.
Yeah, that's actually that's one of the more poignant parts of that film.
Yeah, oh, that whole, yeah, I know you're not cool, I've met you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You'll never be cool. It's not what we do.
The dialogue in that movie was so amazing.
It's so good.
But
yeah.
but you know, for all kids out there who, especially because it's funny. Again, I just finished the program. I was around kids all week.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody freaking cares about being cool.
Right.
So at what point, it's a good lesson for them to realize. Like, at what point do you realize, like, you know what, dude, I'm not cool, and I'm okay with that.
Right. For me, it was really early on. It was really early on. I understood that I had an overwhelming desire to like make things, to express myself, you know, in some capacity. And then I became really close friends with Mike. Jose and I didn't really play music together. We would skate together and surf together. But I met Mike, and him and I became close friends because we were in a bunch of the same classes, and we sat next to each other. And when he started playing guitar, he got good really fast. When he expressed interest in making music, that I had that exact realization. It was like, oh, if I hang out with this dude who I love already, he's gonna make anything that I do sound better just because I'm near. You know what I mean? Just by proxy, I'm going to sound better. And maybe he felt the same thing. I don't know. But so I think that, you know, that's a good kind of like marriage of sorts, when you can be with somebody who you love and love to be around, and then you make each other look cooler in the process. It's like high fives all around.
That's a pretty good goal for every relationship.
Yeah, I think at the heart of it, though, you should love who you're with, because I think that heart should be there, and that kind of essence. If not, that, to me, this is just my opinion, that isn't cool. If you're with somebody just to sort of try and be cooler or look cooler, that's going to show through very quickly. And I think that listeners of music or viewers of art, I think that they can kind of like see that, smell it, sense it, and even if they don't at first, they'll eventually kind of see through a very thin veneer. So I think love, admiration should be like kind of the...
Respect.
And respect should be the footprint of what you're doing. And then if you guys make each other look cooler, then that's just a plus. Then you're good.
Well, I was going to say, I agree 100%. I've had this conversation with so many artists over the years, and I think I think fans are often shortchanged.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as you're younger, you'll buy into certain pop shit, and you're like, yeah, whatever. But I think as you get older, and it's like, I have this conversation with so many artists. To me, the artist whose career I think is the coolest is Tom Waits. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, he can tour whenever he wants, he plays whenever he wants, he has this huge fan base. But I mean, he's never, and to me, he's the coolest dude in the world. Yeah. But amazing songwriter. But the thing is, he's never been mainstream. He's never been popular. But, you know, with that, he also has this fan base and can do what he wants and everything like that. Yeah. And I think that for so many artists, they respect that. But that's all based on longevity and being honest.
Yes.
And I think, so it's interesting to me, one of the songs I've been loving lately, I go back to Dylan Blood on the Tracks all the time. That's one of my favorite albums ever. It's just a perfect album. But there
I
are...
listened to that yesterday, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
The whole album all the way through?
All the way through. A buddy of mine and I were painting a mural in Venice, and we listened to that record all the way through twice, actually. It's so good, man. It's such a good record.
Well, I was going to say, you go to the song If You See Her Say Hello, for example, and you look at the honesty, the emotion in that, and it's just like, dude. So for you then, and I mean, it's funny that you were listening to that album, but what are some of the songs for you as a fan that have that honesty? And also then, we'll do that part first and then come back, and I was going to ask you too, because the thing is, again, I know for every songwriter, you always want to do your best. For every writer, you want to do your best all the time. Right. But you hit upon moments. You hit upon things where it's just like you reach something special, and every artist has that. But as a fan first, you know, some of the songs that have that honesty for you.
They are, there's so many different kinds of music and music appreciation and music experience, and I've been lured in by so many different kinds of music experiences over the years. Sometimes pop, sometimes you just want a swig of Coca-Cola, and you're like, it's sweet and delicious and fizzy, and then, oh my god, I feel like shit and I can't get this feeling out of my body. That's pop music to me.
Nice.
It has an occasion sometimes where it's appropriate. then there's occasions where you just want like a fucking super mean, dirty sounding riff. And like one of my favorite bands growing up that did that was Bark Market. And I actually became friends with Sardi years and years and years later. I was able to like geek out on them a little bit and be like, how did you do that? They sounded so grimy and awesome, you know? And then sometimes you want, this is for me, most of the time, I want an honest lyric with an honest performance. Those are the hardest things, I think, to come by. Because even though they'll sometimes be expressed in very simply, that's, for some reason, that's the most difficult thing to do. I think that we have a culture that is mostly sort of pop and is tolerant of mostly pop, which is that quick. It's a quick fuck. You know what I mean? It's not having a glass of wine and turning the lights down and getting to know somebody in conversation for a few hours and then having like 7-hour lovemaking, tantric. You know what I mean? That's not really our culture. It exists.
It's Lady Gaga, not Marvin Gaye.
Yeah. So, I mean, to pick one, wow, I mean...
Well, you can pick multiple. I'm always curious as a fan, because I'll sit and geek out. And again, like I know for me as a fan as well, there will be songs that kind of resonate. They'll come back to me over time. And it's like U2, for example, there's a B-side called Luminous Times, Hold On to Love, that I just recently rediscovered. I hadn't heard that song in probably 10 or 12 years. I'm like, fuck, this is a great song.
Yeah. The hard part for me in answering this question would be like choosing even a couple. That there are a few that have really kind of like changed my life. And it may be funny to some listeners, but I've gone all over the map with my musical appreciation, quote unquote. But I remember one of the first lyricists that I really, really, really fell in love with as a teenager was Ani DeFranco.
Awesome.
Yeah. You aware of her material?
I've interviewed her multiple times, and she's
awesome.
freaking amazing.
Yeah, and I still keep up with her when she comes through town. I go see her, but I saw her at the Troubadour when I was 17, and I was probably one of 3 men in the audience, which was curious to me because I wasn't really sort of savvy as to what the scene was or whatever. But she was touring on a record called Puddle Dive, and I remember enjoying her presence, and she seemed to have a really kind of like sharp sense of humor, but then when she would start singing and really kind of getting into the grit of it, like there was like this girl had gone through some shit, and you could tell, and she was doing it, she was expressing it with honesty, but with a sense of humor as well about itself and about herself. So I fell in love with her stuff a while, and actually in a lot of ways she unintentionally, just by me listening to her music, kind of taught me about honesty in lyrics. I also love Bob Dylan, though I got into him a lot later. I got into him when I was more of an adult. A lot of his themes. I appreciated the kind of historical quality of it and what he did for music when I was younger, but I didn't really absorb the lyrics as much until I was more of an adult, because those themes started to resonate more. Wow, I could go on. I mean,
well, you know what? I mean, it's so cool to like give Ani DeFranco some love, and she's an amazing songwriter and amazing artist, and she blazed such a trail doing Righteous Babe at the beginning, and I mean, her stuff is so freaking good, and so right there, just by talking about that, I mean, if 10 people go out and like check her music out now, who had never heard of her before, then that's freaking awesome that you mentioned her, and again, such a fan of her stuff as well. But it's really interesting that you talk about the honesty in lyrics, because again, as I was saying beforehand, every artist obviously strives to do your best. But there are just, you hit upon these moments, you hit upon these things that are special for you. And you talked about how difficult it was sometimes to do that as an artist. And Paul Westerberg, for me, is an artist who just like, he'll hit upon, like, my favorite songwriter is Tom Waits, but Paul Westerberg will hit upon these like lines of clarity. I'm just like, what the fuck? I'm like, how does anybody see that? And it's just like blow me away. And he's one who does that for me. For you as a writer, some of those moments for yourself where you can go back and listen to and you really like, you can appreciate a line. And what's always interesting about it as well is, I mean, you started writing at a very young age. Your perspective changes, it morphs quite a bit. And so I'm sure there are early lyrics you wrote that now you're like, damn, I don't know where that came from, but I'm still really proud of it.
Right. They pop up every once in a while. I kind of went from trying to find an apt metaphor for my kind of lyric writing arc. I feel like when I first started, it felt more like a blender. Like I was throwing in all the words I knew into a blender, and as I've continued to do it, it's become more and more like a pressed juice. It's a little more refined, you know. But I'm interested in that refinery, and that kind of that way of saying more with less, in an economy of thought, and perhaps writing more from a heart-centric place as opposed to a head-centric place.
Are there songs? Well, let's take it now then. I mean, if it's something that you're interested in developing, let's take it to Sons of the Sea EP. Are there moments on there where you feel like you accomplished that?
I think so, yeah. I hope so. I mean, it would be perhaps a little bit too bold of me to say, yes, I have done it, and here it is. You know, I think that's more for the listener to decide. But there were even moments like on the last Incubus record, though I know it wasn't the most popular Incubus record in our catalog. It did kind of seem to garnish a little bit of a cult following, because it is such a different Incubus album than all the rest of them. It's so much more mellow and streamlined, and more kind of melodically based than it is riff based. But there's a track on If Not Now When called If Not Now When, and it's a very simple lyric, kind of employing that economy of space like I was talking about. And the melody is very pretty, and the song is very pretty, quote unquote, but it has, I think, a weight and a resonance that is effective, and I really like it. And it's also evocative. And we've performed it a number of times over the past couple of years, and there have been moments where, without wanting to or needing to, like, I felt that kind of emotional evocation starts to kind of rise up out of me, and then I'd open my eyes and I would see it coming out of people in the audience singing it with me. So I think that means that you're doing it right, when you can feel the lyric and the melody coalescing and kind of tickling in your chest and sort of sending out this vibration amongst your body. I think that's when you're doing it right. There's a track on the Sons of the Sea record called Avalanche, and it's on the LP, which is out at the end of September, but it's mostly piano and a vocal, and then there's some like French horns that appear in there, and then kind of like the stomping, almost like theater sounding rhythm comes in at the end of it. And the song uses the idea of an avalanche and an emergency as an opportunity to see shapes and beauty and opportunity in amongst a calamitous situation or chaos. And the lyric is actually quite simple, but it's suggesting a larger potential, a bigger picture kind of a thing. And I think, I'm going to just say, I think that it touches on that idea like that we were talking about as well. I hope, I should say.
Well, why don't we check out the track If Not Now When, and then we'll come back after that, and we'll wrap up talking about, you also have a new book project coming out.
Yes.
And I want to talk more about the LP and everything. Okay. But first, we'll check out If Not Now When. So this is Steve Baltin on Speakeasy on the Independent FM. We are here with Brandon Boyd. We'll check out the Incubus track If Not Now When. Come back in a minute. Hey, this is Steve Baltin. You are listening to Speakeasy on the Independent FM. We are back here with Brandon Boyd from Incubus, and we just heard the track If Not Now When. We are not listening to that now, otherwise I wouldn't be talking. But before the break, we were talking about moments of honesty in lyric writing, and Brandon, you were talking about the fact there's a song Avalanche, which is going to appear on the LP. Is the LP actually done?
Yes, we recorded the whole project, and it's been finished for some time, but we decided to sort of roll it out slowly and really kind of there are some times when just jumping into the pool with both feet and just taking your pants off at the party first is the thing to do. And in this regard, I decided, and with the team of people that I'm lucky to work with, decided that sort of rolling it out more slowly, introducing it more slowly was a good idea. So we started with 4 of the songs, and we wanted to see, like, number one, what the reaction would be, and also give ourselves a little bit of time to plan. Because there's no band at the moment, and I will be putting a band together to like do shows and stuff, but it's just, in so many ways, it's so different than Incubus and the way that we've done things. We haven't chosen like a single yet. Normally we would like make a record, choose a single, make a music video, put it out, hopefully radio would pick it up, and we go on tour, and that sort of approach worked really well for us over many, many years, and we're really lucky that it works so well. But it still works in certain regards, but in a lot of ways we live in a very, very different world now, a very different industry. So what we're trying to do is let the sort of what's happening around us dictate how we, you know what I mean? It's almost like crowdsourcing your approach.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and yes, as you were talking about it, I realized I was thinking about the fact that it is so different. But what's also nice about this, and I've had this conversation with a lot of artists who've done this as well, and I think there is something to be said. Incubus is still, I wouldn't say at this point any band is stuck in a model, but obviously when Incubus puts out a project, there are expectations on it based on past history.
Yeah.
So it's the idea is that you're going to go out, you're going to tour arenas, you're going to do all this stuff. You will have a music video. It'll be a big production. For you, releasing this under the name of Brandon Boyd, I'm sure it gives you a lot more flexibility and freedom of there's not those expectations of, well, basically feeding the machine as soon as it comes out. So you do have that sort of freedom that comes under your name.
It's a little bit more malleable, I should say. But also, I'm allowing it that opportunity because I could have very easily just sort of stuck to that older idea, which, once again, there's a time and a place for it. But this so far hasn't felt like that. It hasn't felt like it wanted to sort of be fed into the same plot line. I wanted, in a lot of ways, I wanted and still want it to define itself along the way, kind of make it up as we go, which is terribly foolish in like a music industry scheme of things. But I have a feeling it's going to. It'll be rewarding more so in the long run. So I'm essentially, by doing an EP first, allowing it to unfold along the way, I'm kind of playing the long game. I'm being patient just to see really what it wants and how our listeners respond to it.
Because you are doing it that way, what have you seen so far in terms of both what it wants and also how are you seeing it define itself? Because it is an interesting thing to have it define itself via the fans and via over time versus that expectation of, all right, we're taking this song right now to alternative radio and we're putting this video out for YouTube and MTV and whatever one channel left in the galaxy that shows music videos.
Are there any left?
I'm sure somewhere in the galaxy there's probably some aliens who are watching music videos who are freaking loving them and smoking some pot and just like, yeah, this shit's cool. I wonder why those Earthlings gave them up.
Right? Like, what are they thinking?
And then I'm going to get all kinds of calls of like, dude, you're on crack, but whatever. I just like that image of like people sitting around like,
Yeah. The aliens, if they were getting our kind of like TV feeds, they would probably just be getting, the first base of like Total Request Live or something. Like, we don't know about this, but maybe there's something good going on. Then they get to 120 minutes and they're like, fuck yeah, turn this up. Cool.
Watching fire hose videos and stuff like
that.
that.
That'd be so cool.
It would be really cool, and I feel like there's a film in there. We've totally digressed into a very, but
we'll
at the
same time. We'll talk about that more later. What was the question? Sorry. I got stuck on aliens smoking weed.
And watching music videos. It's a great image. You can get stuck on it.
Yeah.
But the question was, as the project Sons of the Sea has defined itself, and by the way, very quick question, so will that be the album title as well?
Sons of the Sea. It'll be, the EP is called Compass, but Sons of the Sea is just going to be a self-titled LP. I remember.
So the question was, how has the record defined itself as the 4 songs have come out?
So far, it has been a little bit more like meeting somebody organically at the farmer's market or your local dive bar and meeting them again a couple nights later and the conversation keeps going and then you go back to meet them because you truly want to. Like, wow, that's an interesting person. I want to keep talking to them. And then a week or two later you find yourself, you can't stop thinking about them. And that's the way it seems to be unfolding as opposed to hopefully you're following my strange way of comparing these things, as opposed to the old regime, which is a little bit more like a militaristic dating service.
Yeah.
It's like you put it out there, it goes into the the clip of like 30 other things, and it just gets fired at people, and then a couple of them stick. Like, oh, you got me, and then you just keep shooting them until they just can't get it out of their head. Which, once again, there's a time and a place for that, and sometimes that works. Actually, Incubus has benefited mightily from that equation in many ways. But this is a little bit more like a slow, romantic date, and then you can't stop thinking about the person. It seems like it's been so interesting is that I've been a lot more active sort of in the social media aspect with this than I have been ever before, and promoting it through, because this is an independent release. I'm promoting it through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I have a company called Incubus that's helping me with it, as well as an independent publicity firm called Surefire, and these people that I've hired to help me. But a lot of it is hinged upon my involvement. So I'm seeing all this immediate feedback through these social media resources, and that's where I've kind of gotten this idea that people seem to be. It's a slow burn. People are like, I don't know about this, but I'm gonna give it I'm gonna listen again tomorrow, and we'll get back to you. And tomorrow they're like, I like this song. This is cool. And 3 days later they're like, I love this song. And then a week later they're like, when's the rest of it coming out? They seem really excited. So it looks very hopeful thus far. Yeah.
Well, I always find that way more gratifying. I'd much rather, I always find it, using your analogy, when you meet someone at a bar or a club and you're like, yeah, they were cool, whatever, and versus a week later when you're like, damn, that person was cool.
Yeah, what they're doing right now.
That's the much better and much more fun, and also more importantly, it's the one that lasts a lot longer. So I imagine as from a music standpoint, it's got to be kind of gratifying that,
Yeah, I hope that's the way, to me, that's the way it seems is unfolding, and I hope that's the way it feels. And the listener can use their own weird metaphor.
Whatever metaphor works for them. I'm pretty sure that every listener in the freaking history of the world, though, has had that experience of the person you want to bang versus the person that you can't stop thinking about.
Exactly.
It's really what it comes down to.
Maybe you guys have extended long tantric sex at some point in your life, but that's the way my experience with music has been a little bit like that. That's why I use analogies like that. And metaphors and whatever they're called.
Well, remarkably, we are almost out of time, but we want to talk quickly about the book project coming out. So that comes out September as well, correct?
Yes, September 5th. It is my third art book. It's called So the Echo, and it is a little bit like the first two books that I've done. In it, it's an art book. There are many pieces of art and paintings and things like that, and some weird photography and travel musings and poetry and things like that, but So the Echo is not too dissimilarly from the Sons of the Sea project. It's far more streamlined, and the work is a lot more focused, so there are more whole pages dedicated to a piece as opposed to kind of like a sketchbook that's been rearranged, which is very much what the first two books are. This one's a lot more like a serious book. It's cool though, I really dig it. I actually see today, this afternoon, the first copy of it for the first time. So
nice.
I'm really excited. Yeah, it's gonna.
So this is a big day for you.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Well, we had Serge Tankian on the show not long ago, and Serge creates art as well. And he created this music that he created these paintings that actually have freaking music in them. I mean, because he's just Serge Tankian. He does that shit like that. So my question is, will you be combining the touring with the art shows? Will there be opportunities to do that?
That's sort of my highest ideal for this, is to somehow combine two things. There are ways to do it, and they're sort of defining themselves as they go, but I would very much like to combine the two things, because that would be the most honest way to present the work, because both the imagery and the writings that are in the book, So the Echo, came about when I was writing the record with Brendan, the Sons of the Sea record with Brendan. That all happened kind of in the same year-long period. So it would be the most honest way to present it all, which is cool because it gives us the opportunity to do this multimedia presentation of art. I see it all as art. I see it all as one big tree with multiple branches. So hopefully we'll find a way to get that done. I got to call Serge and talk to him about how he's been doing it. That's a cool dude right there. I haven't seen him in a long time, but it's an awesome.
We had so much freaking fun with him on the show. We did not, however, talk about aliens watching music videos while getting stoned.
I'm surprised. I feel like he'd want to talk about that.
I feel maybe we should have a panel discussion. For the next. My friend Chang does Smoke Out. He does it with Cypress Hill.
Yeah, we did that once. It was really fun. The concert, you mean, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole panel discussion to be had there, and who is going to appreciate that discussion more than a bunch of stoners?
True. Let's talk about,
And we could get Cheech and Chong on there, and we're fucking done.
Oh, yeah, that'd be amazing. I got a bunch of questions for those two.
Actually, I interviewed them not long ago again for Rolling Stone. They're the fucking coolest dudes in the world.
Really? I'm not surprised.
And they're funny as shit. You forget how funny they actually are,
I went and saw their performance of remember they did their thing at the Gibson Amphitheater a couple of years ago, and it was awesome, man. It was so funny. I love that stuff.
And Earache My Ass, still a great song. Basketball Jones, dude.
Right.
All right, let's find a wrap-up song, and what's a song to head out with? I mean, is there anything that, and we can also do something from someone else. So if there's a song that's sort of...
Interesting.
Maybe since we were giving her some love earlier, maybe wrap up with an Ani DeFranco song.
Ah, that would be amazing. Let's do that. The record that fucked me up in the best possible way by her at the best possible time was Dilate. So why don't we play that song from that
Nice.
record?
All right, you heard it at the suggestion of Brandon Boyd. We are going to wrap up today with Ani DeFranco's Dilate, title track from that album, and so happy to give Ani DeFranco some love because she just freaking kicks ass.
Yeah.
And such a great live performer, too.
Yeah.
Oh my God. If she comes to your town, you have to check her out. Anyway, this has been Steve Baltin on Speakeasy on the Independent FM. We have been here with Brandon Boyd talking about Sons of the Sea EP, new book project, tour, all of that stuff coming out. And, we got into some fun topics as well. Not to say the other stuff isn't, but, I've never, ever in an interview before discussed aliens and tantric sex. So, and I've interviewed Sting and it still never came up. So there you go, man. Cool, dude. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man.